Parallax Academy, dynamite your chaos. The tightrope walk over the abyss. Come join and listen, because you must change your life.
Hello and welcome, Marianne, to Parallax. We're about to start our third course with you, which we're entitling, or you've entitled Integral Tarot. It's got a very long subtitle, Cracking the Code Part 2, Anatomy, Architecture, Wisdom, and Benevolence. So that's awesome.
Title.
I
That's
thought maybe that would be a good place to start, and it might be a good place to start with benevolence.
yeah,
I was thinking about that in terms of how when you talk to people about the tarot, they're either scared in some kind of a way, or they think it's esoteric wanking,
yeah.
a terminology that you've coined for us, and I always think about. Either one, or they're just terrified of it in some kind of a way. So maybe that's a good place to start. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, benevolence, it's the essence of, of what we discover through the divine path of growing old, as Lila Zovic used to call it.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, there's not much more than that, trying um to feel the quality of love that's holding everything together. And somehow in this very narrow and cramped space that are our indestructible personalities, try to act from a few drops from that. So it's part of my big and at the same time very little crusade, um, to try and help people understand what the tarot can be. And what it can be is a wonderful tool for self-observation, um, which leads to self-remembering, which leads to being one with something way wider than the cramped little space of personality. And thus, intuition, sometimes, aha moments, hopefully the capacity when you read for someone to guide them or help them realize that there's a way around or through their question that they hadn't thought of before. But a lot of people want to jump from nothing to the oracle. And when I say
Hmm.
oracle, I mean oracle in the holiest sense. You know that the etymology comes from the word mouth, os oris. So the principle of the oracle is the mouth through which that speaks. And of course, the great question is, what is that? Because
Hmm.
anything can speak through the oracle. So in the original sense, uh, the highest level of being was supposed to speak through the oracle. Destiny itself, reality itself, life itself, which doesn't really have one mouth or one language. And so the way I understand the notion of oracle is whichever way that's insane coherence and love that is supporting all of this, which has no, it has so many ways of being symbolized, but apparently people keep killing each other over the way they understand what is the best symbol. So apparently we're not really out of the swamp yet. So there is something that holds our existence together and this whole cosmos and the very fact that we can, wonder about it and be in awe of it. And that something does not have one sacred language, whether it's Hebrew or Sanskrit or, you know, like classical Arabic or whatever else. There's already that many sacred languages. And then in any given sacred language, there's so many different sacred texts that so many different people interpret in so many different ways.
Hmm.
So I think tarot being a game and emerging from this very mysterious invention that were the common game of cards that was born at the end of the 13th century. It's connected with Western symbolism, very simply, the suits.
Hmm.
It's connected with numerology, very simply, the language of numbers. It's connected with something that's very alive, the desire of people to replay life on a table, battles and, losses and wins and alliances and all that lila of, like the Hindus say of the divine game of being human. And that is a language. So the question becomes, when we use that language and we aspire to somehow be an oracle, which is the place where someone tortured by deep questioning and doubt comes to when they profoundly want to face their destiny. That's the history of why people go to oracles. They have a dilemma, they have a situation in their lives that seems to have no solution. So they go to the oracle. So when they do, the point is not the language or the form or whether it's a symbol that's like, floating in a bunch of like clouds of steam or whatever else. The question is there any way to understand the language per se, the, the grammar of it, the vocabulary of it,
Hmm.
the sound of it? And who or what do we expect to speak through it? So that's why I'm talking about benevolence, because we have to think we want a benevolent answer, even if it's hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes benevolence can be really hard, but we want an answer to our deepest questions that is not betraying us, that is not leading us astray.
Hmm.
So we want to be, we want to, I think we want, well, that's what I think. And if people come to my class, I'd rather say what I what I have to offer because, like we say in French, la plus belle fille du monde ne peut donner que ce qu'elle a. The most beautiful girl in the world can only offer whatever she has. So that's my, and and I think what we really want is that quality, that sentiment, that feeling of coherence, which is a feeling of love and benevolence and things being in the right place.
Mm.
We would love for reality or life to not to give us our way because we know, I mean, when we grow a little bit older than 8 years old, we kind of know that it's impossible, that we will be frustrated, we will be tried, but we would love to know that the frustrations and the and the challenging situations, ultimately they have a meaning, they love us somehow.
Mhm.
So how do we develop, besides the language of tarot itself, which is pretty simple? I always say it's like playing chess. You have a chessboard and the pieces, or how do you call them, the characters, they each of them moves in a certain way, and there you go.
Yeah.
So with tarot, it's like that. With any specific deck, and I work with the Marseille, as you know, which is like the historical deck that was most played with, there's a bunch of rules as to how to orient oneself in its grammar and, the basic
Mhm.
Berlitz guide for whoever was born anytime before 1982 to the
Mm.
language of tarot. And
Yeah.
okay, so that's not really, that's very easy. But how do we apply it to ourselves
Mm.
and then to others in a way that allows us to come closer to being the oracle for whatever dimension we aspire to? For me, that's
Mm.
the only question. And it's not
Yeah.
a
So it's
spiritual question, it's a poetic question, it's a
yeah.
philosophical question. It's not necessarily something that means you believe in God. It just says how do I spit out pearls and diamonds and not, toads and snakes like in the fairy tale?
Mm.
Very good question. How do we do that? What do you think?
Oh, that's great. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that I was thinking as you were speaking. You started talking about self-remembrance, and
Mhm.
then that there's this ground of I don't know what your words were of love somewhere, and yet we feel like we're kind of caught in this fragmented. I think we feel like we're caught in this fragmented existence, and we're looking for order and meaning on some level. And I was thinking that tarot is a language of images more than sounds in the sense, the English language is, phonetic, and old languages were often very imagistic and that this allows us to access something that we couldn't access because we're in the modern world, we're so trapped in our intellect, in our mind, in our, rational way but we're somehow trapped by that in some sense. That's just some of the thoughts that I had as you were speaking. And then I was
Well,
thinking that
you want to,
the
yeah.
tarot is this something that it's this mandala, and you put the pieces together and you sort of orient yourself
Mhm.
towards benevolence and meaning and virtue and all of that.
I'm taking notes because you're so intelligent. I have to answer everything. So basically, your answers are around the notion of fragmentation, and there's really two different ways to address that, which are radically, different domains. So the first one, because we're talking about a class, what do I call integral tarot? A tarot deck has 78 cards, and if you don't play with this children's toy, which is called the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which is a different world altogether, a very nice little novel that American people and English people usually love. So if we go back to the actual deck of playing cards that has its origins in Italian and European Renaissance at large, you find cards that are pretty puzzling because they don't look like anything that you can easily decipher. So most of the people, they just take this part of the deck and they leave it in the box and they go for this, which is the so-called Major Arcana, and are easier to project anthropomorphic fantasies upon. So the notion of integral tarot means we have to learn to think of our vital questions in symbols too.
Hmm.
So what good does it do me to place a triangle or to place, an intertwining of wands in front of my question? Or how do I relate to the court cards that have, faces, but they're very cryptic because they all have, they carry their suit and they are dressed in like characters from the 16th, 17th, 18th century. So how do I relate to that? And that's very interesting because you said we were caught up in our intellect, but for me, we're not necessarily just caught up in our intellect. We are caught up in whatever dominant center we have. I will
Hmm.
elaborate on that. And we are caught up in the mythology of our time.
Hmm. Right.
So, and we are caught up in a vocabulary of our time and culture, which ends up in many ways not meaning anything. We keep hearing right now about strikes, and they're talking about bombing human beings. Strikes,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
such a convenient word. And that's just one among a thousand examples. And same
Abstraction,
in,
like making everything
yeah,
abstract, so we don't have to
yes, yes.
confront it
So
directly. Yeah.
what happens is a triangle is a triangle is a triangle is a triangle. There is something about shapes that if you describe them, there's not a thousand ways to talk about them. If a card has a dominant of yellow and red, it does. If a card has a sword in the center, it does. If a card has a flower in the center, it does. And there's not a lot of way you can spin that. So when we work with those very basic symbols and we begin not to explain them or translate them, but bring them into our essential energies so that our attention is not caught up in words or in looking at our body to check whether we have gained that many pounds, or
Right,
obsessed
right.
with judging the sexiness of people around us and in the streets, or completely eaten up by emotional states that keep changing and that we become fascinated with, because there's many ways of being fixated.
Mhm.
We have the ability to come back to sensation, come back to the vitality of our moving center, desire, metabolism, come back to our emotional center, come back to our desire for mental clarity, and see all of these fragments of who we are as energies in motion in time. And it so happens that the tarot cards relate not to not well, of course I have to use words when I teach. So I can tell you, yes, a five of wands is this and this and this and that. But essentially, five of wands is a landmark that keeps appearing on the flow of a certain quality of energy that is common to every human being. So in
Mhm.
everybody's sexual experience throughout their life, there are five of wand moments that have something
Mhm.
in common in terms of intensity, a sense of maybe danger, temptation, this or that. In everybody's creative process, there are a series of moments that were five of wand moments. And if, etc., etc. I mean, the wands are the most complicated center to explain, but basically it's, feeling potent or impotent, sexy or frustrated, um, energetic or super tired, creative or completely empty, having a sense of beauty or disgust. It's kind of like embraces all of that. And throughout a human life, from literally like birth to death, that huge domain of energy kind of like flows and
Mhm.
moves in many different ways. And the numerology of the tarot has numbers and symbols to describe that. So it's great because if you really want to self observe, which is to come back to an impartial moment of connecting with yourself, now you have a reminding factor, which is the tarot
Mhm.
card. And that's true of all the 40 pip cards and in another way of all the court cards. I'm not going to go into more detail, but so these are like incredible. It's like numbers, it's like sacred geometry. When you enter that language, and it's not that difficult, you begin to be reminded again and again and again that your thinking mind is weak, that your fascination for emotions is shallow,
Yeah.
that the ups and downs of your whatever energy is essentially ridiculous, and that your body is always crying for your presence, like in the Sufi story, with such beautiful story where it says there's a rose bush at the entrance of your garden and it's screaming for you to come and smell the smell of roses, and you're so worried with everything else. And the Tao is just a reminding factor that life is magnificent inside of us, even when it's uncomfortable. So that's the
Mhm.
first step. That's essentially, I'm not a spiritual teacher at all, but I teach the material so that people can work with that.
Mhm.
Then they can read for themselves from that. And
Mhm.
suddenly, answers we did not have begin to appear.
It seems like that we have a bunch of cliches in our head about what reality is. And then when you pick up a card, it sort of surprises you. It sort of jolts you out of your cliche. Like when you were talking now, I said people were lost in our minds, and that's kind of a spiritual cliche that everybody says,
Yeah,
and then you pointed out that we're also lost in our emotions and in our in our
yeah,
body obsession and in all
yeah,
three of those areas. What is sort of what I was thinking of Gurdjieff and how the three bodies are. It's the relationship between the three that matters, in a sense. And also that what the tarot does, it reveals something that's a bit surprising, that breaks you out of your ordinary kind of
yeah.
mental
But
mindset.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
when you say that, Andrew, someone who's toying around with a shallow tarot could say the same. So it's not enough.
Mhm.
It's true that when we draw any card that we attribute a meaning to, and if we are ready to place our attention on any kind of drawing and give it meaning, it's going to produce a shock because it brings us back into our right brains, very
Yeah.
simply.
Yeah.
Because observing, but that's not enough.
Mhm.
What you're actually addressing, because you've been following my classes and I know what you're referring to, is that when you have a previous sense that a card can actually, that any card in this vocabulary can actually be connected to something that is a true experience of yourself.
Mhm.
And then you draw that card, and something reminds you of the truth, of the fragment of truth that it has become to crystallize in you concerning one aspect of your humanity and not your personality.
Oh,
That's
that's an
essential.
interesting distinction between those.
You are shocked
Mhm.
into choosing humanity over personality at that moment. Of course, there will always be a sense of personality. And you mentioned Gurdjieff. In the Gurdjieff school, as in many schools, there can be a little bit of a of a idealism, like, oh, either I'm like, I'm like in the swamp of personality, or I am. It's not true. In the midst of
Mhm.
that, there is what Mr. Gurdjieff calls the three centers balanced, which is just being able to aspire to being fully human, even if you don't perfectly self-remember at the time, whatever that means. Even Henri Tracol said it can't be defined, so let's not even try. But I mean,
Mhm.
we're not always swines and we're not always angels. We're always, most of the time, something in the middle. And for me, what we do with tarot is how do I relate to humanity in myself? It's already a lot
Mhm.
because it kind of like, you know, wakes me up from that narrow dream of being this person with this story, blah, 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 blah. So when you can do that for yourself and when you can jolt yourself out of your own drama
Yeah.
and just go back to read tarot for yourself on a simple question and go like, oh, wow, and feel
Mhm.
like you have a partner, which is just printed paper. How can printed paper be a friend? It's wonderful. It's like books.
Yeah.
Then you can venture into maybe trying to read for others, which is basically the same jump as going from sexual self-exploration into actually having a true connection with someone else.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's not a given, and it's demanding, very demanding that we listen and we're able to kind of communicate with the other person. And at some point, you realize after a number of days or weeks or months or years, according to how in tune you are with the tarot, that you're actually able to perform an act of human relationship that has intrinsic dignity with a game of cards. And that's where the notion of integral tarot comes in. It's not just the whole of the deck.
Ah.
It's the whole of who we are. It's the whole of the situation, you know,
Mm.
because, a person will drop a card, for instance, when they mix them, and you will know whether this card just goes back into the pack or if you pick it up. Something in you will know how to acknowledge the very integrity of the situation as answer, so that somehow the cards become the frame within which some kind of ceremony of truth is taking place. It's
Ceremony of
very,
truth. Oh.
yeah,
Mm. That's like
it's a
a,
very
yeah, I'm thinking
humble.
of all the Japanese style, rituals, like tea ceremony
Yeah,
and things
the
like that.
ceremony, absolutely, it's the
Hmm.
same thing.
Yeah.
Because when Mr. Gurdjieff said three centers balanced, the only way for the three centers to be balanced is in the moment. So he was also, I mean, I don't want to, explain Mr. Gurdjieff, that would be highly um, That would be complete hubris on my part. But what I observe is just that it also means to be truly present because we can daydream about being present. We do that
Mhm.
all the time, also, you know. So it's very interesting because technically, what are we going to do? We're going to learn to combine the court cards and the pip cards and the major arcana in ways that we learn how to phrase a question for ourselves and design a reading, because of course you can design as many forms for reading as you want with as little cards as possible. Ideally, three, four cards, no more, so that you have some answer that you can really reflect on, and then many ways to reflect on those answers with keywords, with imagination, with observation of shapes, with the many ways that we have at our disposal until you become able to help yourself answer questions in an efficient way with a deck of cards, of playing cards. And then maybe you can venture into relating to another person in integrity and
Mhm.
not as, you know, someone who loves to hypnotize someone else. So that leads us to the second question, your second question about the fragment. You know that I studied for a long time with Jodorowsky, who is both a wonderful human being and in different ways someone I deeply disagree with now. So, you
Mhm.
know, like the stick has two ends, but I am very grateful to Jodorowsky for his study of the tarot and for the masters he chose, André Breton, Leonora Carrington, and others.
Can
And
I ask a little bit about that, or can I go into that a bit, or would you rather
it's
not?
just one thing. Jodorowsky said, tarot is a whole, it's a unity
Yeah,
that has been fragmented into bits. And
yeah.
our task is to learn to reconstitute its whole
Hmm.
before we can play with its fragments again. And when, of course, it's Isis and Osiris, it's so many stories of fragmented divinities, but it's us. It's
Yeah,
the solve and coagula of the alchemy. It's we start out believing that we are one, and then we contemplate our immense fragmentation. We realize that many of these fragments are even lost. We don't know them. And once we have somehow recuperated all the fragments of ourselves, something is born at that moment in ourselves, another quality of unity from which we can speak to others and help them. So sorry for the detour, but I thought it was worth giving this, you know, that's something that, I mean, he didn't explain it in so many words because he was less of a wonker than I am, but I'm very grateful to him for that notion of the reconstituted, fragmented divinity, or you know, like the pilgrimages of Shakti in India. It's the same
hmm.
story. So, what do you want to ask about Jodorowsky?
Well, I was just curious because, I ran into his assistant in the Bastille years ago, and then heard about him,
Hmm.
and then met you. And today I was in the Bastille with my friend, and my wife said, "Oh, give her a tarot reading." I was sitting there in this cafe giving this person a tarot reading, not which was very funny, and just a simple one. I'm not obviously, I'm obviously not I'm a beginner in this area, but um, I was thinking about the lineage that you come from, and I think I can feel a little bit why you might have some disagreement with him, but I'm wondering about the differences. I think it would be okay to talk about the differences, but it might be interesting for people to know about the
Yeah.
differences without putting him down in any way, because he's obviously
No, no,
a
no, no, no,
majestic
no.
figure in so many,
Yeah.
in many ways, right?
No, it's just, you know, first and foremost, I think a lineage is always a mystery. We think
Hmm.
we've figured out our teacher and their teachers, and we haven't. And the deeper we go, the more I go in life, and the more I realize how deep every lineage I'm connected to uh, runs and how mysterious it is. So that's pretty wonderful. So in terms of Jodorowsky, you know, he was the son of an immigrant Jew in Chile who was an atheist. He was raised in very violent and extreme conditions, and he was a self-made artist and man with a very high sexual appetite, a very macho culture, very strong lust and desire for glory. So very strongly connected with the male ideal of the 20th century, but a Jew from Latin America, which means with even more of a social neurosis and power complex and all of that. So for me, mostly the one thing that I disagree with, that I don't feel connected with in Jodorowsky's character today, is that he has not been able to evolve past his and that's not a criticism. It's just that he remained very fixated into, you know, Western white male kind of arrogance and blindness. And he was Me Too'd about a rape thing in one of his movies. And so the corollary of that is that the way he envisioned the spiritual work at large, I owe him the meeting with my root spiritual teacher, who is Arnaud Desjardins.
Mhm.
I owe him having met a very important spiritual friend and benefactor who was Lee Lazawick. So I owe him so much. And yet, he went to Lazawick's Sacred Bazaar and only paid half the price of one of Lee's sculpture, which Lee already gave him at a very low price, and never paid the second half. And he thought he had made an amazing deal. And he managed to not pay that Jew, as he called him. And the more I'm connected with Lee's lineage and wisdom and beauty, the more I realize that Alejandro self-inflicted an incredible loss of value to that amazing Buddha he bought, because he did have the means to pay. It was ridiculous. It was like 800 euros at the time,
So he
and
was
it
playing
was
games in some kind of a
huge.
way, yeah. In that
Uh-huh.
case, in that particular case, it was a game rather than well, anyway, that I guess
Well, that
that's
when
not
I
so
say
important,
disagree,
but
yeah, when I say disagree, that's what I mean. I don't disagree in terms of, oh, I'm angry at him. I'm like, my God, he has a Buddha that was sold to him personally by Lee Lazawick on his altar. And his great satisfaction is that he didn't pay for the whole of it. And the definition of paying the full price is the spiritual path. So that's my
yeah,
main disagreement. I
got
am
it.
trying to live my life paying the whole goddamn price. And I don't know if I will be able to have the ovaries to do that up until the end. And it's very clear that the path that Jodo has chosen has been to save. And maybe he will be saved for that, and I'm the sucker in this story. I don't know, but that's the main place in which I think he's essentially an artist for
Yeah,
whom the greatest deity is his creative ego. And I have
this
disengaged
is a
from.
trap for many artists, isn't it? They
I don't
don't
know
get
if
to
it's a
that
trap. It's their
next stage.
religion.
It's just what
It's
they
their
are, I
religion.
guess. Yeah, okay.
But because I've learned to read tarot with him, and I have experienced the pain of so many people. And I have been faced with my incapacity, like in Domal's poem, trying to give oneself, we realize that we are nothing. Uh, so when you realize that, there's a moment when the thirst for trying to reach being is much more important than the self-satisfaction of giving a good reading to someone. And that's where the divide is, but it's not that much of a divide. I mean, I still love and I love Alejandro, and I'm deeply grateful to him,
Great,
essentially. Yeah.
great. Okay. Um, so maybe I was just looking at how you've organized the course that's coming up.
I have
You,
no idea. Remind me, because
yeah.
you asked me for a program and I kind of like, lay an egg and then you make it into something and then I have to follow that program.
So yeah, the first part was, I mean, the fact that it's an integral program is kind of interesting because I know a lot of people who are this whole integral movement with Ken Wilber, and
Yeah.
So that word has a certain resonance.
Yeah.
Um, but the first session was about the numerology of seven.
Of 10.
So the seven and the 10,
Yeah.
which maybe this is a bit too nerdy to go into in an introductory podcast,
No, it's very simple
but
when you
I love I love that 7 and 10 numerology thing and the sevens, and maybe you can talk about a little bit about that. That
yeah,
would be the first session.
yeah. Yeah, the 10, it's very simple. The 10 is what I look at when I look at my hands. So it's the first numerology we have to learn because it's our capacity to be moving around and active in the world. Whereas the seven is the way that the human being relates to the cosmos and thinks the cosmos relates to him or her. So it's the seven seas and the seven planets and the 7 days and the seven chakras. So as soon as the Western, at least human being, not only Western, but let's say Western because tarot is a Western instrument, begins to try and situate itself in the universe, the number seven appears. And number seven is intertwined, of course, with the numerology in 10. So we always begin with the numerology in 10 because that's the way to acquire an operative vocabulary together. And then when we switch into number seven, so it's very interesting. For instance, right now I'm the consultant for a big tarot, the biggest tarot, um, um, like investigative and artistic show in the Museum of Bergamo, which has one of the oldest tarots. It's going to go to New York also, that same expo. And they hired me as, the person who speaks for the cards, but also knows something about history
Mhm.
um, and iconography. And they have this very ancient 1470s tarot that has 74 cards. So there's obviously one knight missing, and there's one three, the three of swords, if I'm not mistaken, missing. But there's 20 major arcana, and 14 of them have been made by painter Bonifacio Bembo, and there are seven remaining that have been painted at a later date by another very well-known painter who is Antonio Cicognara. And when it's laid out, you can see that those are those like gold gilded tarots. So they have like gold leaf, and the series of the 14 cards has a certain quality of gold leaf and a certain work to it. And then there's the rest of the cards that have a much brighter gold. What is my point? Apparently, two cards are missing, which would be the devil on the tower. Except that when you look at the six cards that Cicognara designed, it's impossible that on that golden background, he has drawn a destroyed tower and or a devil. And that it's a perfect series of 20 cards.
Mhm.
So for me, it was a flash when I saw that, and I said it to the curator of the expo. I said, they must have had first 14 cards. We know that some of the original tarots in the 15th century had only 14 suits. So there was this notion of, 14 suits and 14 cards in every series from 1 to 10, and then the four court cards. And this numerology of seven was present. And suddenly
Yeah.
they realized that they had numbers from 1 to 10. So they decided to have two series from 1 to 10 for the major arcana. So this intertwining of a world cut into 10 pieces and a world cut into seven pieces, it is essential to how we embrace reality. And we need to be able to play with this double symbolic language. And it sounds far-fetched, but it's actually very easy and very satisfying because we suddenly look at everything um, as a measure,
Mhm.
as a right measure of. So it's like in the Gurdjieff school where there's a shock needed to, go from the third to the fourth
Yeah.
step in the seven step process. Suddenly having this notion of the necessary shock makes sense. And it's the same thing with the numerology in 7 and in 10. We realize that there is a law, there is an order to that. Just like when we grow a garden, we don't expect flowers to like bloom in the midst of December everywhere. So it's always also a way to become much more patient and much more observant and observing of the timing and laws and balance of reality. Did I go very far, or do I make
Yeah, no,
sense?
that's good. I, I in terms of the difference between the 7 and the 10, maybe that could be clarified because the first 7 major arcana up to the chariot, it's like days of the week. It's also sort of like
Yeah,
um, the ordinary life span.
yeah.
And then there's a change when you get to 8, and there's a change. So there's a change after 10, and then so there's the yeah, as you say, there's these kind of um, cycles, right, that are being addressed.
Yeah, or I would say layers of experience, because you have the three um, layers of the major arcana, but you also have from 1 to 7 in the minors and
Yeah.
from 8 into the court cards.
Mm.
So it's very interesting because the first series is just like, a week or a series of chakras or a series of colors. So basically is how unity kind of diffracts itself into 7 notes or 7,
Mhm.
whatever, 7 colors. And then there's this notion because when we, number 8 and 9 and 10 in the numerology, in the decimal numerology, they they don't. Ha, that's already a class, but let's do it. When you get to numbers 8, 9, and 10, we cannot describe them physically the same way that we described the numbers before. For instance, if we want to look at the growth of a plant, we can describe very easily the steps from 1 to 7. But when we arrive at 7, we have the whole process of the fruit growing, which then
Mm.
involves 8 and 9 and 10. So a little orange that is this small appearing on an orange tree is not the same as the green orange that is yellowing in the sun, is not the same as the orange that will fall in your hand as you touch it, is not the same as the rotten orange on the floor. And yet it's the whole process of fructification. So what happens with the second scale of the minor arcana is that we realize that not everything is describable in terms of, I would say, almost practical examples, and that there is a quality of experience within us that relates to this second um, layer of the minor arcana.
Mm.
And that's one of the ways that we will be playing with the readings. One of the goals of this second um, series of class on the minor arcana and the whole tarot is to be able to design and play with more and more elaborate reading structures that can also, because I love that, birth themselves into creative prompts, um, uh, structures for contemplation, but that are not whimsical, that have some gravitas in terms of how we can use the tarot creatively and not just, as a made in China kind of,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
you understand the difference
Mhm.
between, it's not much, but there's a way that the true gravitas and quality of a given object kind of resonates inside of us when we use it for creative or contemplative purposes, that kind of like enhances the humanity in us versus just pure entertainment. So
Mhm.
that's what we're looking for. We're looking for dopamine wells, secreted from the right place and going back
Yeah.
into the right place in the world. We're trying to live, yeah, in a dignified and noble way, even though it doesn't really show because we're just, playing around with cards.
Yeah. So how can a game, yeah, be dignified and noble instead of just being a form of distraction or because people are bored or because people need some sort of stimulus because their lives are empty or or whatever. Yeah.
I think it's a matter of how multi-layered our relationship with that game is, um, and how, because being adults, we cannot just immerse ourselves in organic um, innocence and absolute presence just like that. Some people can, but they're usually
Yeah.
called awakened.
Right.
So children can play with, a bit of wood and a stone and just go into absolute sacredness. And when we become more quote unquote sophisticated, more complicated, actually, Swami Prajnapada, my teachers used to say, mind, thy name is complexity.
Yeah.
So if we kind of like paralyze the mind with a super multi-layered connection to that game, which is, to know the rules of the actual tarot, to know the vocabulary of its symbolism, to know the vocabulary of its numerology, to know something about the iconography of it, to have a vision of how extensively it was played throughout the centuries in Europe, to have some notion of the revolution that happened with it in the 19th century. I'm speaking for myself now.
Yeah. Yeah.
How, blah, blah, blah. So we will approach it like we approach a monument. We will be ready with some kind of um, uh, respect, reverence, awe, um, and so our attention will be heightened. The
Hmm.
purest quality of attention will be heightened. And so maybe something akin to the true feeling of sacredness will be awakened inside us. And so we will be more similar to the child who is, observing the ants in the sand. And so then, because those images, have lived through the centuries, they will suddenly catch our attention. One of the things I always do is teach students of the tarot how to renew their attention towards a deck. And what happens when you do that is that people lose interests for shallow decks. Little by little, you don't have to tell them throw
Hmm.
this or that deck away. They will spontaneously, people who are have a habit of observing the tarot so that they will be surprised by a card they've seen literally thousands of times. They will end up keeping the decks that have intricacy and depth to their symbolism. And if you give them, now there's a horrible thing happening, which is that with IA people can generate images and texts for whimsical oracles, and it's very easy to publish. So recently someone gifted me an oracle of the angels, and it was horrible. It was
AI
beyond
slop, or
pornography.
what as they call it,
Oh
right?
my God, it was
It's just,
horrible.
yeah, it is horrible.
But,
Yeah.
but I was wondering, what is it in me that becomes repelled immediately by those images? What is that sixth sense that has been developed? And I think that the observation of, historical Marseille decks in their intricate beauty and quality uh, is it's a wonderful education for it's like looking it's sacred art. It's sacred art. It's like looking at these like objects of antique pottery that can look so simple, but there is something in them where you can feel the transmission of how to make this shape and how much they've been used and respected in time. It's the sacredness of craftsmanship,
Hmm.
because this is a work of craftsmanship from,
Yeah.
this tarot from the beginning of the 18th century.
Yeah, I
So
think the repulsion of AI, images and music and all this sort of thing, maybe will drive people back to wanting to, look at things that are much more craftsman
yeah,
or manual, or so
it's
it's
one
like,
thing or the other. Either their brains will rot
yeah.
and we won't be there to witness the catastrophe, or there is some wonderful, sparkle of something divine in us that will be so repelled that we will survive as humanity. I don't know. I'm
Hmm.
praying for the
Oh yeah,
second.
yeah. So, well, I was thinking about how the reaction you get to the cards is often,
Yeah.
like I was thinking about my own tradition. I guess in Eastern traditions, there's all of these
Yeah.
fierce protectors who are kind of the reaction is like kind of scary and shock and like
Yeah.
and then there's this incredible beauty in the other images, so the wrathful images and the beautiful images, and when you contemplate them, you're kind of you're shocked out of all of this sort of um, yeah, just the mechanical mind that Gurdjieff talks about, and all of the
Yeah.
ugliness that is being produced by sleeping mechanical people.
But
Anyway,
talking about that, because you're referring to, for instance, what could be the Tibetan tantric tradition, it's
yeah.
incredible that in the French uh, 17th, 18th century, you have an image here that is so close to the description of the, for instance, in the Bonpo tradition would be the ritual of Che,
Yeah,
and
sure.
you have an image that is so close to the dancing dakinis.
Yeah, that's
So
Vajrayogini right there. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So what's very interesting is that this does not come from the road of silk. This comes from, oh, because this is not the traditional Italian, death as a triumph in the Italian 15th century paintings is riding a horse. So death walking like this and, cutting bones and stuff, cutting human pieces and stuff. It's as if there was a layer of symbolic beauty and intelligence surrounding the earth as a being that
Hmm.
some people kind of like channeled and received through their practice. And
Yeah.
this is what we're talking about, not Mr. or Mrs. So and so, even if it's, Arthur Waite, deciding that they will create symbols out of the blue. I mean, read Henry Miller and Lawrence Durrell and whatever, Somerset Maugham, if you want to read novels. It's another story if you want to read stories that are ego driven, which is great, or just watch, platforms. And I do that sometimes to just rest my mind. But why do we want to look for that in the tarot when we have a tradition that has um, gathered so many riches in an almost impalpable form, but it can be given back through our attention?
Hmm. So in the second course, I maybe I'll just lay out that what you said that you're going to teach us.
Go ahead.
At the
Surprise me.
second one was the three bodies of the tarot: physical body, the subtle body, and the causal body, which of course makes me think of Eastern thought. And then towards an integral reading the whole deck, meditating on the sacred geometry of the minor arcana, um, it's moving towards an integral kind of vision of how to
Yeah.
use the cards. Integral meaning, I guess, putting them all together as a whole, or
Yeah, because
um,
one thing is to learn a language and to learn to understand that the major arcana are like the causal body because they represent something that is almost like a cosmic mirror of what we can be, like, the Plato's ideas, etc., that has historical ground. And then the figures of nobility, the court cards in the tarot, actually refer to our qualities of character. So that's the essence of what the psyche is before psychoanalysis. It's this notion of what are my inner allies and enemies. And then, as we said, the whole mapping of the human uh, four main centers or energies or languages is to be found in the pip cards. But there is something a little bit mechanical about all these explanations.
mhm.
And there's learning anatomy and then there's learning to dance, and
Yeah.
both are connected. So, because the tarot is not an internal body and we need to get to know it, it's an external body. We need to learn its anatomy before we put it in movement. Otherwise, we do whatever. But once we have a notion of what is what and who is who, and we have some kind of common vocabulary, then it's very interesting to try and dance because something happens in the dancing, which is the reading basically, and different ways of comparing cards of different levels between them, and different ways of asking, and different ways of For instance, you can take one major arcana and ask about it with minor arcana. And suddenly you will see that some elements of the major arcana are actually, I mean, she has one wand in each hand, for instance. And
Mm.
these are exactly the same wands as the wands. So, and this is not something you can exhaust. You have to have, it's like dancing tango. You cannot describe everything that has happened between every leader and follower since a century ago when the tango became to be danced, and it keeps growing and being invented.
Mhm.
So we have to find a way, I have to find a way to teach tarot as an art. And that's what integral tarot is about. It's like now we have the vocabulary. We're going to look at a couple of things with the numerology in seven, which is the ray of creation descending into us, seen by the cards, but we will immediately come into play. And through the play, we find the theory again. Because when
Mhm.
the answer does not resonate, it means that there is something we haven't understood about the vocabulary of
Mhm.
the card. It's
Mhm.
very simple. So, the proof of the play is, does the answer resonate? Does it resolve something? Does it in the present open up a sense of knowing oneself better, a sense of having a free space that we can walk into, a sense of more spaciousness in the chest, a sense of like clarity in the mind, a sense of relaxing in the body. All the things we know mean that we are finding a way,
Mhm.
basically to agree with reality as it is here and now, because
Mhm.
that's exactly what we're supposed to do. Like it's not reality has to agree with us. That never happens. We have to find a way to agree with reality, and it's most of the time it's really hard. It's easy to say yes, but like another spiritual teacher, Yvon Amar, used to say, to be yes is another question. So when you read the tarot for yourself or for someone, the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is, am I being more yes than I was a second before? If not, we go back to trying and understand what happens with the card.
So by
And that's
yes,
how we
yes
find a
meaning you
healer.
you can integrate more reality, uh, uh, or something like that. Yeah.
You can be one with what is as it is here and now. Is there anything else, Andrew?
Mhm. I guess not. I guess not.
I mean,
Yeah.
but it's a very easy formula.
Yeah.
And then
It's
try,
easy to
you
say.
know, try losing a child, try having to be with
Mhm.
a parent that is dying for years,
Yeah.
try being betrayed, try losing a huge amount of money, try being homeless. So, I mean, and even minor irritations that sometimes, for some reason, because we are so complex, becomes something that's fucking unbearable. So instead of doing a line of coke or, taking psychedelics or whatever else is a solution outside, I always say that the tarot is a natural psychedelic because it guides us, but it takes some effort into the place where something clicks into, oh, the splendor of reality. Oh, life is perfect as it is. Oh, I am profoundly aware and certain that I am right now. And I don't want to talk about self, remembering, but that's the aim. That's the only thing
Mhm.
there is, to just be, yeah, that's the vocabulary that works for me. It's like in full agreement with what is as it is here and now. And that's the definition of happiness. The
Mhm.
French writer Stendhal used to say, désirer ardemment ce que l'on possède, to ardently desire whatever we possess, which is a more
Mhm.
psychological way of talking about it. But it's the pleasure of taking a dump or drinking when you're thirsty. That's a complete yes from your whole being. So I'm sorry for being so mundane, but that's
Mhm.
what it is about. So that's the proof. Any tarot reading that goes into any other direction is a waste of your time and sometimes money. We don't want
Mhm.
that. We want that humble game to bring us into the realm of being happily one with reality as it is.
Mhm. Mhm. Very good. Yeah, I like the introduction of humility again. because um, it could go the other way very easily, right? It could become some maniacal, egomaniacal sort of,
Yeah.
as
Oh
you
yeah.
say, titillation, and
Oh
bringing
yeah.
good Jeff words back in.
Oh yeah.
And I guess there's always that sort of, I mean, I can feel that in myself when I'm playing around with it. I'm probably, sometimes it feels like just a distraction, titillation game that I'm playing, and
Yeah.
other times it feels more like I'm in the zone more, more, so to speak.
But if we make a pact with the tarot that it will be a tool of self-knowledge before it is anything else,
Hmm.
then if you have an obsession happening during
Yeah,
your day, which happens to every one of us every day, we're
yeah.
at least 5 minutes obsessed with something, and you go to your tarot deck to kind of ease your obsession. And so, of course, you have the temptation, even if you've read the tarot for a long time, to get an answer, to know the future, to get your way. It's wonderful because the very fact of taking the tarot and being tempted to ask from it something that is impossible with whatever reality is not going to cater to our whim. That's not going to happen. Not with a tarot in your hand, not by doing, psychedelics or whatever other kinds of drugs, not by going to the shrink, not by fucking as many people as possible, not by writing 25 different books and being very famous. It's just not going to happen. And not by killing yourself, of course. So the temptation is there, and we know in the depth of ourselves that it is perfectly impossible. And you have this friend in your hand, and it's as loving as a dog. You know,
Interesting.
it can, the love
Wow.
that the tarot, once you charge the tarot with that pact, it's as funny as a cat and as heartbreakingly loving as a dog. It's a wonderful companion for someone like me who travels too much to have a pet for now, because it looks at you with its dog eyes and it loves you and it's like,
Uh,
you can't. And then, it turns away from you in disgust with its tail in the air, like the cat goes like, you're ridiculous. And it's just, it happens. So it fills in your pocket, which is great. And you don't have to feed it or bring it out to pee. So get a tarot.
I get it, Taro. Okay.
Adopt a tarot.
Instead of a dog, or
Not instead. I
children.
mean, no, I wish I
Yeah.
could. I wish I had like a couple of cats and a dog, but that's gonna happen when I grow older and I have the relevant husband that will babysit them
Mhm.
when I'm
Okay.
away.
Okay, well, this has been a wonderful conversation as usual. I wonder, is there anything else you can say to seduce people to come to this course and or just
Oh no, if you're not
invite them. I was kind of teasing, but
no, I'm not gonna seduce anybody. If
yeah.
you're not interested, please don't come. If you're not,
Okay.
even
That's the right
mildly.
way to seduce them though, Mary.
No, but seriously, I don't. I believe in attraction, not seduction.
Mhm.
So
Oh, good.
tarot itself attracts, and it's already very hard to deal with attraction. It's even harder to deal with true attraction than it is with seduction. Seduction is everywhere and it's hiding the truth. Attraction is a life and death matter because it's the same force that holds, you know, the Earth in orbit and all the other planets around and whatever flies around in the cosmos. So I would say if you feel attraction, I would encourage you not to be afraid because life is short.
Oh, very
And
good.
come over and we will be kind
Yeah.
as much as we can.
Okay. That's great. I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah. The difference
But
between seduction and attraction. Hmm.
I've seen very wise people and very advanced people destroy uh, things that were causing them attraction. So it's a very deep question, actually. I think it's when we are called by attraction, we're called by forces that are way, way deeper than us. I mean, I don't remember the first day that I had a tarot in my hand, but little did I know, really. I remember once I walked into a psychic, an old psychic woman's. I mean, she had this like little sign downstairs that said, and her name was Lux Eol, like light and wind, no? And she was this old black-haired lady with a shawl on her head, and she almost looked like something from a movie. And there was, one of those mansardes very low. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, she was near the Gare Saint-Lazare, and I was in my early 20s. I was maybe just 20, yeah, 20. And my grandpa had just died, and I had just decided that I would not touch a tarot cards anymore. And the things she said to me, she looked at me, she said, someday you will be sitting in my place. And there was something I was like, oh, what the fuck ever, and it was so cinematographic that I was kind of like titillated by it. And completely stopped reading the cards and being with the cards for the next 10 years. And she was goddamn right. We don't
Interesting.
know. Attraction is,
She was the
it's,
oracle in that moment, so to speak.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
attraction. Yeah.
Cool.
Be attracted and pay the full price.
Very good. Yeah.
Which is, we're all gonna die.
Yep. Yep.
That's what you need to answer when people want you to read the future. You're
Well,
gonna die.
you're
What
gonna
else do
die.
you want to know?
What do you want to know about the future? You're gonna die. Right. Of course. Of course.
So, okay, you're gonna die. So now let's go to the real question.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but besides that, we're very kind people, and the class is really fun, and there's a little very nice, very lovely quality group from different countries, and with a lot of, mixture of cultures and very passionate people. So it's a nice little posse to join.
Totally. And we've got a little community kind of coming, and people
Yeah,
are going to meet them next tomorrow, and
yeah,
as students of this and practitioners.
yeah.
So,
Voilà.
okay. Thanks so much, Mariana, as
This
always.
is what this girl has to offer.
Good. Very good.
See you soon.
See you soon. Bye bye. Thanks again.